Greeting high school language arts students. I am enjoying this flex class. I hope you are. Really, I want you to interact with me, okay? If you're having trouble posting something, ask me. And sometimes there's quirks with Zoom or quirks with OutSchool. And, if you're having trouble one day, try again. If you're having continual trouble, let me know. And let's see, what other things do I need to cover before we get into the language arts for today? Yeah, ask me questions. Truly, I want to hear from you. Post what you're writing, send me questions. You can send them in the classroom, you can send a note to just me as your teacher. So, whatever works, but I really want this to be a meaningful class to you. So, even if there's something else I haven't covered, I can do a second video for the week, or I can write out an answer to something. So if there's something that I'm not covering that you're really interested in, please, please, please let me know. So we are moving forward in history. This is American literature 1780 to 1800. One thing that I want to couch and just remind this statement and remind everybody, good literature is a reflection of the times it was written. It is a reflection of the person it was written by, but it can also still say something to us today. So when you read something, think about the historical times it was written in. For example, there can be something uh, written in there about practices that we don't practice anymore. There could be something very specifically religious, and it goes against what you believe in your religion. There could be something that's derogatory to a group of people or hurtful to a group of people. And we now see how hurtful that is. And we work to make changes to stop that hurt. So that's not to say that all of the literature that I talk about this is like on some sacred level or it's perfectly written. It's just, I'm giving you an example of what was written, and we can learn from what is written. And there's usually some truth in what is written that we can relate to, that we can say, oh, yeah, I, I can understand this. I can relate to this differently than when the writer wrote it. But I tell anybody every once in a while, somebody will say, why did you pick this piece? Because it represents the times it was written in. And that's what we look at when we look back in history through literature. We study what was. There are some things that we can still hold on to. There are some things and thoughts that were like, yes, I mean, Shakespeare wrote a lot about family and friendship and love, and we can learn some things through that. Shakespeare was also funny. it's he inserted humor into almost everything he did to show that life needs that touch of humor in there. That's not to say that Shakespeare's writing are perfect. So there's none of this literature that I post. Part of what we can learn is also what not to do, how not to hurt others, how not to be negative in this society, how to bring compassion, how not to bring hate, things like that. So please know that what I'm doing is I'm looking historically at the literature that was written. Okay. I am not holding any of this up to a standard of perfection, but read it to understand what was going on, understand the minds of the writers. Okay, influential books that were published during this time. I thought this was kind of a funny list because this is a very serious time. There were a lot of political, social, scientific movements going on. that, the world was changing rapidly. A lot of times we look at our world and think our world is changing rapidly. Their world was also changing rapidly. So, on this list are some of Benjamin Franklin's writings, experiments, and observations on electricity. Yes, he was describing his experiments. Find this online and read excerpts from this. This was an exciting time. This was a chance to bring great change. Sometimes we're on the edge of space exploration or on the edge of some type of technology or some kind of medical breakthrough to heal something. And we forget that there are times in history where other people have been on the same edge of a breakthrough. And this is one. They were like, yes, this is possible. Electricity is possible. So, most of these older ones you can just search for and find because the copyright is off. So, you can find them online legally. Here's another Benjamin Franklin. Poor Richard Improved and the Way to Wealth. Benjamin Franklin really had a lot of wit and wisdom in what he wrote, a good sense of humor, very intelligent, and he shared both with his readers. Here in an almanac, Poor Richard, and he wrote it under the pseudonym Richard Saunders. So look for that. Look for some of the humorous times. A lot of times, again, we think of Ben Franklin as very serious, very intellectual, which he was. But he reminds us that life has a little, needs a touch of humor. Thomas Paine, very serious writing, Common Sense, 1776. It was first published anonymously in Philadelphia, and it appeared at a time when both separation from Great Britain and reconciliation were both being considered. Do we become independent, or do we reconcile with Great Britain and find a way to make it work? Both had logical arguments of what was best for the colonies. Thomas Paine focused blame on colonial America's troubles on the British king and pointed out the advantages of independence. That's going to drive me crazy if I don't put a period there. I'm a proofreader and I still don't catch my mistakes sometimes. So look at this up. Again, you can find it free online. But this is one of the influential books that was published in the colonies in what we now consider the United States and is considered American literature, very influential at the times, and was using common sense to say we need to break away from Great Britain. Guess what? Noah Webster lived during this time. A Grammatical Institute of the English Language. You're like, why is this important? Why is this an influential book published during the times? Noah Webster believed that an American language was important to create independence for the new nation. So you're wondering, why is there American English and British English? Here's one of the reasons why. Noah Webster is like, we need to have standardized rules for an American language that reflects the diversity of all of the languages that are coming over. Now, a lot of times we make the mistake of thinking one group of people primarily came over. That is actually so far from the truth. A diverse group was coming into the colonies, and that was creating new dialects, new words, basically an entire new language based on the British language. And Noah Webster said this is really important for independence of our new nation, to claim this language difference, break away from the strict British language, and standardize rules for spelling and pronunciation. We need, if we're going to say these words, we need to figure out how they're going to be spelled and how they're going to be pronounced. So he wrote this book, and it became what the school children learned from on how to spell and pronounce words. This was their spelling book. This was the nation's first pronunciation guide. And the book royalties then made him financially independent, and then he could write the first American dictionary. So part of the literature at the time was saying, what words are we going to use to write our literature? That's why this is a significant book at the time. So a grammar book gets put on the list, but it was very important because it was the first what we would call now the United States American grammar book that chose our unique way of saying things. And again, it was from the European perspective. Uh, Native American words were not pulled into this. And it was basically from the white European perspective. So don't get me wrong that this covered languages that were being spoken, but this was a break off from the European languages that were being spoken. And Amelia Simmons, American Cookery. Now, one of the interesting things about this does reflect some of the Native American cooking skills that the Europeans took from and developed based on what ingredients they could get here on these lands. So it was the first cookbook of American authorship to be printed in the United States. Millions of cookbooks later, billions of cookbooks later, this industry is still thriving. They did, again, and I'm going to capitalize Native American here. They did take some of the ingredients from Native American ingredients, just corn, squash, and pumpkin. They have pumpkin pudding baked in a crust, and it's now what many people eat as pumpkin pie, which is a tradition for many holidays for many people. So we have the first cookbook. So I'm not necessarily talking in the first grammar book, so I'm not necessarily pointing out some high forms of literature here, but it is exciting to see what books were published at the time. What was going on around the world? Some other literature that was published. These are just a very few short list here, but La Histoire de Juliette, by Marquis de Sade, Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Lyrical Ballads by Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth, and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Look up some of these. Again, the copyright is off, so you should be able to find these online free of charge. Even if you don't want to read the entire selection, look it up, get a taste of what it is. Again, it's a reflection of what language was going on in the world, of what people were believing, of where we were as societies. Who are we going to focus on today, though? And some people are going to say, why are you talking about this person in a literature class? Because this person wrote a lot during this time period, and it should be recognized as literature. Meriwether Lewis, you're like, what? Meriwether Lewis was an explorer. Yes, but Meriwether Lewis wrote quite a significant amount of information and wrote it in such a way that if you read it, it is beautiful literature. It is nonfiction literature, but he actually had quite a great flair for getting his thoughts down, descriptive writing. If you study the words of Meriwether Lewis, you will be amazing with descriptive writing, nonfiction descriptive writing, which then we can take into creative writing. So who was Meriwether Lewis? Born in 1774 near Charlottesville, Virginia, died near Nashville, Tennessee in 1809. Was an American explorer who traveled with William Clark across the middle of what is now the United States and into the Pacific Northwest. His father died while serving in the Continental Army in 1779, and then he served in the Army and became the personal secretary to President Jefferson. Now, in 1803, Thomas Jefferson appointed Lewis commander of an expedition to explore the American territory newly purchased, and the Louisiana Purchase. You can see it on the map here. So Thomas Jefferson now has this land that has been added to the United States. And it's like, I don't even know what's there. What is this? And so Lewis and Clark, you've probably studied this in school, had to go and explore. So you think, still, what does this have to do with literature? This belongs in a history class. Well, Lewis wanted to be prepared for the journey. So Lewis traveled to Philadelphia and studied astronomy, botany, zoology, and medicine with the nation's brightest scientists and doctors. And he started recruiting people, purchasing equipment, boats, and supplies for the expedition. So notice that many people went on this. We tend to give credit to just Lewis and Clark. There were women on the expedition. There were Native Americans who helped along the way. There were many people who were servants along this way. There were people who were basically treated as slaves along the way. I would have to look up to see if they were actually slaves. I don't remember that aspect of whether anyone who was owned as a slave. But notice there was a lot of people who went. This is not Lewis and Clark just happily floating in a little boat and everything going well. This was a group effort. And you can see that through the writings of Lewis when we get to it. But Lewis studied for this. Okay, Lewis didn't just haphazardly write down, oh, look, there's some kind of mountain over there. There's some kind of animal over there. Lewis wanted to know what he was seeing, became a researcher. Is like, if I'm going to write about this, I'm going to put it down accurately. Like, I want to know what I'm looking at when I look up at the stars, when I see animals, when I see plants. I want to know. So that makes a good novelist. We can trust what Lewis is saying because Lewis was prepared with research. So from 1803 to 1806, Lewis and Clark's Court of Discovery traveled to the Pacific Ocean and back, mapped the lands, described the natural wonders, and encountered people of the Western North America. We have almost 5,000 pages of their journals. We have written accounts of the natural wonders of this country and what it was like to cross by horseback, on foot, by boat. And it's a view into the Native American world in a sense. No, did he let the Native Americans write this? No, but he was very honest about what he encountered and who he encountered and what their lives were like. Now, remember, because the Native Americans were not respected at this time and not considered intellectual by other explorers, their history is often destroyed. It wasn't kept. It was history through the eyes of people who met them. So the fact that we have Lewis writing very accurate accounts gives us insight into things that we don't have in the voice of other Native Americans because we destroyed a lot of that. So this is a great way, you wish we could have it in the voice of a Native American. That would be ideal. But since we destroyed a lot of that, and since we don't have a lot of that history, this is a wonderful way to get a view through somebody who wanted to be accurate, who was trying to be accurate. Yes, still through the eyes of a European, but at least through an eyes of a European who was at least making an effort to be accurate. Now remember, Lewis was writing this as they traveled on scraps of paper. And remember that spellings were still a little up in the air as to how we were going to spell things. And sometimes when he encountered something, he just had to phonetically sound it out. So, and grammar, don't worry about grammar because they're on the road. So it was not trying to be perfect grammar. Here's an example of what we have. And I'm going to put a link in class of the place where you can find this the best and the easiest and go through these by dates. But here's an example. Set out early this morning as usual, current strong. We therefore employ the tow rope whenever the banks permit the use of it. The water is rather deep for the setting pole in most places. At 6 a.m., the hills retreated from the river and the valley became wider than we had seen it since we entered the mountains. Some scattering timber on the river and in the valley, consisting of narrow leafed cotton, aspen, and pine. Vast numbers of several species of currants, gooseberries, and serviceberries. Each of these I preserved some seeds. I found a black currant and thought preferable in flavor to the yellow. This currant really is a charming fruit, and I'm confident would be preferred in our markets to any currant now cultivated in the United States. We killed an elk this morning, which was very acceptable to us. Through the valley, we entered early in the morning, and a large creek flows from the mountains and discharges itself into the river behind an island on that starboard side, about 15 yards wide. This we call Smoke Creek in consequence of the smoke we saw about. See, if you listen to that, it reads like literature. This is just a great example of descriptive literature. Yes, it's nonfiction, but nonfiction is literature as much as fiction is. Here's a link. I'm going to post it. I put it in here so I can see it, but basically you can look at this first part, lewisandclarkjournals.unl.edu. And again, I'm going to put it in the classroom. Here's another one. The river is still divided by a great number of islands, its channels sometimes separating to the distance of 3 miles. The current very rapid with a number of rifles. The bed gravel and smooth stones, the banks low and the bridge loam in the bottoms, some low bluffs of yellow and red clay with a hard red slate stone intermixed. It's almost a poetry to it. You could almost rewrite these same words and have a little bit of poetry in there. One more. High plains succeed the river bottoms and extend back on either side to the base of the mountains, which are 8 to 12 miles asunder, high, rocky, some small pine and cedar on them, and lie parallel with the river. Past a large creek on large side, 20 yards wide, which after meandering through a beautiful and extensive bottom for several miles, nearly parallel with the river, discharges itself opposite to a large cluster of islands, which from their number I call the 10 Islands, and the creek, Whitehouse's Creek, after Joseph Whitehouse, one of the party. Saw a great abundance of the common thistles, also a number of wild onions, of which we collected a further supply. There is a specific garlic also which grows on the highlands, with the flat leaf now green and in blow, but it is strong and tough, and disagreeable. Found some seed of wild flax ripe, which I preserved. This plant grows in great abundance in these bottoms. I halted rather early for dinner today than usual in order to dry some articles which had gotten wet in several of the canoes. So it's this magnificent journey, all preserved in Lewis's words. We have a few, when you go to that link, you'll see some of Clark's, you'll see a few other people that have journal articles in there. But most of it is Meriwether Lewis, some of the most descriptive. It's absolutely beautiful literature. So take some time, just click on random dates. Sometimes you just have to click back out of it and get to it, because sometimes it just says rain today, was really windy. So some of those dates, there's not beautiful literature like this. So you kind of have to spend a little time looking at it, but there are some absolutely beautifully written pieces on that. And I think that Meriwether Lewis needs to be studied, not only in history, but in literature at this time, to get a good sense of the writing. And again, what can we learn from this? Beautiful descriptive writing. This is how you write descriptive writing. Okay, grammar review, commas. Now, this is where, if you want to hear the literature lecture and then stop and then mark what time you're at and come back and watch this in different segments, or if you have a big chunk of time and want to sit down and watch the whole thing, totally okay. But remember that you can come back to this video, pause it, come back, pause, come back, whatever you want to do. Clauses and phrases. A clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. Clauses can express a complete thought, which makes it an independent clause. That means it's a complete sentence, or expresses only part of a thought, and that makes it a dependent clause. You're like, why are you going over this if you're talking about commas? Because this helps you with punctuation when you are writing. I built a boat. Complete thought, put a period at the end, that's it. But look at what happens when I add one word, when. It now becomes a dependent clause. When I built a boat. If a dependent clause is at the beginning of a sentence, it needs a comma after it. So when you're proofreading your work, always write, okay? Get the first draft down. Do not stress about this kind of stuff when you're writing. It breaks your flow, it breaks your thoughts. I mean, if you know how to use good grammar, do it correctly as you're putting it down. Otherwise, you have a ton of stuff to correct. So obviously, capitalize words at the beginning of a sentence, things like that. But when you're proofreading, when you're done, you're coming back, look for sentences that start with when, if, as, because. They will need a comma after the end of that dependent clause. When I built a boat, comma, I was only 9. When I built a boat, comma, I lived with my grandmother. Okay, a phrase is a group of words that stand together but don't have a subject verb. So like in when I built a boat, I as the subject, built as a verb, in both of those clauses up there. Phrases don't have the subject or verb. They're just words that mean something together. In the morning, before school, with butter and sugar. If they are at the beginning of the sentence, they also get a comma after them. So anything that introduces the sentence, that adds information to the sentence at the beginning, that is dependent on needing other words to be a complete thought, if it's at the beginning of the sentence, it gets a comma. Let's give you some examples. You see in purple, even though I missed the previews, comma, I still arrived in time to see the movie. Megan, comma, are you coming to practice Tuesday? That's the person we're talking to, so we put a comma. When I'm camping, comma, I like to drink hot cocoa. As unusual as it sounds, comma, we like to hike in really cold weather because I like to drink hot cocoa. Those two sentences kind of go together. So you see that understanding what a clause and a phrase is helps you understand where commas go. Here's another comma rule. You're going to have to think about this one. So you might have to pause this one a little bit. Any part of a sentence that can be deleted without changing the basic meaning of the sentence shows commas before and after. So this is what we're going to look at right here. Let's turn this purple. Okay, my basic sentence is Oslo is learning how to sit. Okay, that's the core sentence. Oslo is learning how to sit. The fact that he is my smallest dog can be deleted without changing any of that meaning. I'm just giving you extra information. So in case you want to know that Oslo is our smallest dog. Oslo, comma, who is my smallest dog, comma, is learning how to sit. I can lift that out and the sentence is exactly the same. Oslo is learning how to sit. The meaning of the sentence is exactly the same. Just bonus information. So it gets commas on both sides. Now look down here. I have another clause that starts with who. Both of them start with who. Both of them have the verb. One has is, one has are. So why does the second one not have commas around it? If I take that out, it changes the meaning of the sentence. Then the sentence would be, dogs wouldn't like to swim in my lake. Well, of course, dogs would like to swim in my lake. Lots of dogs would like to swim in my lake. But this says dogs who are afraid of water. I need that in there, or the sentence says something entirely different. Dogs who are afraid of water wouldn't like to swim in my lake. That's correct. If you had put commas around that, that means you could take it out and the sentence would still say the same thing. That's not correct. Does that make sense? Ask me about it if it doesn't. Come back and reread this. Okay, and here's some more. A lot of people forget this rule right here. A lot of people don't put commas after the year. If a day and month are given, there's commas after the day and after the year. The conference will be held on August 6th, 2024, even if the company can't send everyone. People say, why? I don't know why. There's just a rule because it's the rule. That's the only answer I have for you. If only the month and the year appear, you don't have a comma. So the conference will be held in August 2024. No comma, even if something came after that. And you put commas around titles and degrees and anything that clarifies the name, Junior the third, if it's in a sentence. Sarah Little, comma, PhD, comma, is my sister. Robert Johnson, comma, junior, comma, taught my English class. You notice that next sentence is if you choose to leave it out. If it's very clear that Robert Johnson, you don't need the junior, you don't have to put it. That's only to clarify. So maybe if Robert Johnson, junior and senior in the third, all teach at the same place, you might need it to clarify. Now, because we talk, this is another place where you can break. Okay, you can come back to this, mark what time in the video I talk about it. But because we did Meriwether Lewis and the amazing descriptive writing, your essay today is going to be descriptive writing. Meriwether Lewis showed us why descriptive writing is important. If we're exploring a new area, if an archaeologist is digging up something from past history, like recently they have found ancient canoes in places or dinosaur bones in places, just all kind of different discoveries. The first thing that somebody does is describe it. Then we analyze it. Then we come back and say, okay, let's analyze this now. Science experiment. Your first part needs to be a descriptive paragraph because let's say I have these two chemicals, pretend I have something in my hands, I have this one and this one, I'm going to pour this in. The first thing I need to do is describe what's happening. A look turning dark purple at the bottom, lighter purple at the top. Now it's bubbling out of the cup. Then a gas forms, it floats off with a horrible smell. People need to know the description of what it looks like. So when they try to replicate it, when they try to duplicate the experiment, they need to know if theirs look like yours. If not, they need to figure out why. Maybe your room was hotter, maybe your room is colder, maybe all kind of things were going on. So I have my phone off. So there's lots of reasons you need descriptive writing. For example, on this rock, geology, geography, art, science are all places that have descriptive writing. If you had to describe this, I said, write 5 descriptive sentences about this rock. This rock has an unusual shape. It's bumpy and rough on the top and on most of the sides. It has one longer slope down one side. It's got a greenish grayish mixed in with kind of a yellowish goldish tint. It has a few darker spots. Some spots are darker, some are actually kind of brownish or oranges. One side is very smooth, as if it looks like it might already be cut. All you're doing in descriptive writing is describing. A lot of students get stuck on this because we want to analyze or we want to put our opinion in. I like this rock. I think this rock would make a great whatever. So descriptive writing needs to stay purely descriptive. Now, if a teacher says add personal reflection, then you can say whether you like something or not. What you're going to describe today is work of art. When you describe art, you're talking about the colors, the light, the shade, the reflections, the subject matter. The style, is it formal or informal? Is everybody very posed, or are people just kind of hanging out the way they hang out? Descriptive only for this, okay? I know that that's not, we either want to analyze or we want to, this is why this looks this way. He did it because he was trying to say this, or we want to put personal reflection in. No. um, so, description only. Let me give you an example. Artwork behind me. If I had to write descriptive about this is a picture of a tree painted by the artist known as August. The tree is dark in colors, has some large limbs. The trunk is wide, yet still thin in places, has a wide place where everything branches off, has some medium-sized branches coming out and some tiny branches. There are no leaves. There's a light spot at the bottom, and that light green that moves into darker green, that moves into blues that are at the high part. I don't know if you can see this. That move into the darkest blue at the top. There you go. Descriptive. You are describing every single thing in it. Okay. If there had been a bug on the leaf, on the trunk, you would describe the bug. If there had been one little bitty tiny purple dot, you would say there's a tiny purple dot. You don't analyze. Don't try to say why. So here's the painting that you're going to write a descriptive paragraph about. I don't know why we have double Claude Monet at the bottom, but we seem to. I'm going to put this, I think, on day 3. I'm going to put this in. I don't know why this got off just a little bit. I don't know what's happened to this. I'm going to fix it because, again, I'm a proofreader and it's driving me crazy. There we go. Monet painted it. The title of the painting is Sailing at Argenteuil. So what does your topic sentence, your first sentence of the paragraph, have to have in it? Monet's name as the painter and the title Sailing at Argenteuil. Why? Because that's what the paragraph is about. And that's what a descriptive paragraph does. A topic sentence or a descriptive paragraph does is tell us what you're describing. Now, what do you describe in this? Colors. What colors are used? Tell us what are the primary colors, the main colors used. Where does your focus go? Tell us what accent colors are on there, what tiny colors. Subject matter. What do you see? Everything that you see. Like, don't just describe one thing, then say, there's a big boat in the middle. Look in the back, look in the front, look in the corners. What do you see? Describe it as if you have to describe everything. It doesn't matter what order you talk about it in. You can start in the corner. You can start with what you see first. You can start in the back. But you're writing a descriptive paragraph that in the first sentence tells me who painted it and the title of the painting, because I need a topic sentence for every single thing. Now, note that in order to use this legally, I have to say where I got it from. So the words were not on the painting. All of this courtesy of Claude Monet Gallery, and that down the side and the gray circle I put on there. Okay, so it's just the painting that you're writing a descriptive paragraph about, okay? So I'm going to post this separately, but I wanted to put it in the video. This will probably be posted day 3, but I wanted to put it in the video so you have me talking about it, giving you oral instructions. So come back to this when it's time to write if you need. Okay? Now, truly, I want you to interact with me in this class. Get something out of this class. I love writing. I love teaching. I love reading. So I want to kind of give you a history of literature and give you some things that we can find that are kind of exciting to read about. Some of it may not be your favorite, but again, still keep keep up with the class. If you get it behind, that's okay. Take a day to catch up, but and ask questions.